Hey there, friends. My name's Jim, and today I'd like to talk a little bit about Canada. So, if you haven't heard, there's a bit of a protest going on north of the border. Honestly, I don't focus too much on Canada because most of us think of it as kind of a nothing country, but it seems that those same uncommonly polite individuals have had enough, and surprisingly were the first to actually stand up for their rights in a way that Americans certainly have not. So before we go over what I think is the next step in the escalation by the government, let's take a minute to look at how this began and where we are so we can get an idea of how this all will play out. So first off, I'd like to take a little bit of a look at what Canadian rights are, because most of us just think of Canada as kind of another... It's like America. They probably have the same rules as America, but you need to understand that when it comes to protesting, free speech, things like that, freedom things, America really does have it better than any other country, including the Western ones that are right next to us. So let's take a quick look at the Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedoms, just to see if the government is overstepping their bounds and these people actually have a grievance. So, this is a copy of the Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedoms from Canada.ca. Most of the things that are covered in the Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedoms isn't their constitution, it's more like their Bill of Rights. And what's covered by this are basically the freedoms that you would expect guaranteed by any sort of Western nation. Things like democratic rights, mobility rights. Every citizen of Canada has the right to enter, remain in, and leave Canada. Well, seems like that's been a little stepped on considering with the vaccine mandates. I don't think every citizen of Canada can currently enter, remain in, or leave of their own accord. That may be a grievance. Democratic rights. Every citizen has the right to vote in an election of the members of the House Committee or Legislative Assembly and to be qualified for membership therein. You know, equality rights, minority language, educational rights. They have their official languages in there because I have this weird thing where they speak English, but French is their national language, and depending on the province, in some parts of Canada, there's actually language police, so that if you have a sign on your building that has apostrophes in it, like an apostrophe ES or an apostrophe S, that's not how they do it in French. So if you want to make packaging for a product that has an apostrophe in it, they actually have little stickers with apostrophes, so they can stick it onto there, so they could have their product both in French and in English, because that's actually a law. Kind of getting off the point. Anyways, so they have a bunch of the basic rights that we would expect for a Western nation to have. A bunch of the things that you would expect to be called freedoms in Canada or America or, you know, Mexico or South America, Brazil, any European country. Most Eastern European countries even have rights like these. So clearly, they do have some grievances because a lot of these rights have been infringed upon based on the edicts of people in government that aren't even actually creating laws. They're doing just as they have done in the United States. Instead of going through their parliamentary system, their legislative system, they're just straight up saying, hey, you have to wear masks, or hey, you have to get vaccinated, or hey, you're not allowed to go to school today, or hey, your business can't work today. Clearly, that is infringing on the rights of people. So, they do have a legitimate grievance, is what I'm saying. However, there is an interesting caveat in the Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedoms, and that would be known as Section 33's Notwithstanding Clause. Now, the Notwithstanding Clause of the Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedoms, also known as the Overwrite Clause, is part of the Constitution of Canada. This clause allows federal, provincial, or territorial governments to temporarily override or bypass certain charter rights. These overrides are subject to renewal after 5 years. Although the clause is available to governments, its use is politically difficult and therefore rare. So what this is it's part of their Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedoms. It says Canadian citizens have all these rights and all these freedoms that are absolutely guaranteed to them by the government of Canada, inalienable, impossible to get rid of, except for when we need to, get rid of them. So that's this doesn't necessarily apply in this case, but I would just like to point out that even if they were to get what they want in this occasion, if the government of Canada were to just supply legislation that would still infringe on these rights, they wouldn't really have much to boo about it in court, considering that there is this notwithstanding clause that basically says you are free to do whatever you want until we tell you you aren't. And interestingly enough, now Justin Trudeau and his father Pierre Trudeau have spoken before about how evil this clause is, because governments shouldn't just be able to take away your rights all willy-nilly, right? Here's a little article. Justin Trudeau shares his father's dislike of clause allowing override of charter rights. So, Prime Minister Justin Trudeau shares his late father's disdain for the constitutional Notwithstanding Clause, and he's not ruling out asking the Supreme Court to weigh in on Quebec's preemptive use of it to trample the rights of religious minorities. Now, this isn't talking about the protest that's going on now. This is from a month ago. So Trudeau says it's basically a loophole that allows the majority to override fundamental rights of a minority, and that's why I agree with my father that it's not a great thing to have in the Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedoms. So, as you can see, Trudeau puts out this at least put out this notion not too long ago in December of 2021, that there should be no majority ability to override the rights of minorities, which is the whole basis for our position in America, that you actually can't do this. We don't have a notwithstanding clause kind of thing. So, for the sake of the minorities in this country, the religious or racial minorities, he of course believes that they should not be able to be stomped on by the majority of white Canadians. Just putting that out there. Let's see what happens when white Canadians actually come to speak their grievances and see how his opinion changes. So, just to get a little bit of background on the Ottawa Protest, this is from The Guardian from, let's see, Justin Ling, who lives in Montreal. Ling. Probably Chinese. Ottawa protests. How did the rallies against vaccine mandates begin, and what's next? Protesters occupying Canada's capital say they will not leave until all vaccine requirements and mandates have been abolished. And I'd like to point out, I'm getting somewhere important with this, somewhere that's starting to be talked about, so please hang on till the end, because I firmly believe tonight or tomorrow night we'll get into it. So, for more than a week, the center of Canada's capital city has been paralyzed by protesters who have blockaded the downtown area with trucks and cars. City police have described the protest as a siege, and on Sunday, the mayor of Ottawa declared a state of emergency. Now, in a state of emergency in Canada, as you can see from things like the Notwithstanding Clause, basically when an emergency happens, they say we can arrest you, or when they declare a state of emergency, not when an emergency happens, but when they actually officially declare a state of emergency, they can go down here and arrest you for anything. Anything. Just walking around they can arrest you for, because it's an emergency, so they can declare these rights, or they can declare the right to arrest you for whatever reason, and then because it's an emergency, whatever, we'll figure it out later. So, how did this begin? In early January, a relatively unknown group called Canada Unity announced they would be launching a freedom convoy to protest vaccine passports and mandates installed by various levels of the government in Canada. This group has unsuccessfully tried to launch such a convoy before, but this time things took off thanks to the frustration with a new requirement that all truckers crossing the US-Canada border must be vaccinated against COVID-19. So, this is what prompted this entire movement of thousands and thousands of truckers and many tens of thousands of regular Canadians and Americans to Ottawa, because Ottawa is their Washington, D.C. Ottawa is the head of government where their parliamentary building sits now. A couple of things that the counter-protesters or citizens of Ottawa would like to point out. One, there's nobody in that building. The building has apparently been being renovated, and it is having been renovated for a while now, meaning that the honking is... I mean, they claim it's just upsetting the citizens of Ottawa. My argument, if I was there, would be, well, you guys are... If there was a protest like this going on in Washington, D.C., I wouldn't really care, because all the people who live in Washington, D.C. are scumbags, so I'm going to go ahead and assume the same for Ottawa, except for they're probably, like, more polite scumbags. However, the other thing that they've been mentioning is that even if Canada were to give up the mandate that says that any truckers going through the U.S.-Canada border must be vaccinated, apparently that's still a law on the U.S. side, so it wouldn't actually affect them. However, they're Canadian citizens. All they can do is protest their government. I assume they would hope that we would protest our government in a similar fashion, but I guess we're just too fat and lazy, so we'll see. Anyways, what have the protesters been doing? Okay, hold on. Some trucks traveled more than 5,000 kilometers to reach Ottawa, where the convoy started to arrive on January 28th, so that was 12 days ago. After pulling into Ottawa, the convoy is morphed into a rolling protest in Ottawa's downtown core. Trucks and cars roam through the city, laying on their horns in snarling traffic. Bands of protesters wandered into the city, many pushing their way into malls and businesses, maskless despite a provincial requirement that face coverings be worn indoors. The size of the protest swelled to roughly 10,000 over its initial weekend, but declined significantly, and last week the protest became an occupation. More than 100 trucks sat parked on the main thoroughfare in front of Canada's Parliament buildings. Protesters built a makeshift kitchen, and a well-coordinated delivery network brought in hundreds of jerry cans of diesel to those running low on fuel. This is very important, because what I'll be getting into next is the fact that they started stealing the truckers' fuel. They started stealing the truckers' fuel by part of the state of emergency announcement was just to allow them to arrest people who were attempting to assist the truckers. So people who were bringing in firewood, people who were bringing in water, people who were bringing in fuel, those people were arrested, not allowed to go to the trucks. There's actually a couple interesting tweets out there about how they have been clandestinely working around the police to do things like carry jerry cans that are empty, and then when the police pull them over, it's like, I don't have any gas, I just got a gas can. Thousands of these people walking around. It's actually really, really funny. For the sake of that, let me show you one thing. Because if you think it's a ridiculous statement to say that people are going to be arrested for honking, like, okay, they say don't honk or whatever. Okay, let's take a little bit of a look at what's been happening there. Skip forward a little bit. Let's see here, important. This is from the Ottawa Police Department. Anyone attempting to bring material support, gas, etc. to the demonstrations could be subject to arrest. Enforcement is underway. This is from February 6th, 3 days ago. Since then, breaking. Ottawa judge unilaterally makes honking in downtown Ottawa illegal. Canada's officially banana republic. I would agree with that. Judge has banned honking in Ottawa for 10 days. Now, for people who would say, oh, wait, they would never enforce something like that. That's just something trying. Okay. Canadian police roughly arrest elderly man over single honk in support of truckers by Jack Davis today. This is an article from today. This is what is actually happening in Canada to poor 78-year-old people who are just honking. So, a 78-year-old man who was arrested for honking his horn in support of Freedom Convoy says he was surprised by his arrest and rough treatment he underwent in the hands of Ottawa police. Let's just take a look at how this seems to work in the wonderful nation of Canada.
What's your name and badge number? What's your name and badge number?
Yeah, you're a soldier.
Look, they're hurting an old man, a Canadian citizen. It's communism. This is communism. He's scared. Communist.
You stand with the communist fucking government.
Call your police chief. He'll back you up.
For honking a horn.
Call your police chief. Arrested an old man.
Pajama
Shame on you.
Honked the horn.
Shame on you.
Anyways, yeah.
Shame on you.
That's just disgusting behavior from disgusting despots who want to do disgusting things to keep their power over you. Because, really, I do have to point out that these, for what you may have seen from my other couple of videos, I think it's something like 9 out of 10 people that are dying of COVID right now have been vaccinated. So that is not to say that they don't work. They definitely work 100%. It's just that a lot of people are dying, I guess. But things that they are intentionally forcing people to do, such as the truckers being forced to be vaccinated. This isn't about the mandates necessarily. It's about the lack. It's not about the vaccines. It's about the mandates, because 90% of the truckers in Canada, by the government's own admission, are already vaccinated prior to the mandate telling them that they ought to be vaccinated. Now, when all the truckers come in and say, hey, most of us are vaccinated, it's bullshit, you're telling us what to do, the government goes, uh-oh, well, we can't really pull back on what we told them to do, because then we'll look like kind of wishy-washy. So now we just have to stand there firm, which is a problem for the Canadian government, because the more things they see, the more instances they see of things like this going on, the more instances they're going to have of people being like, F that, I'm going to stay for even longer. So, again, you know, the Freedom Convoy, there's videos of Ottawa police seizing fuel. The mayor declared a state of emergency and says the city is losing the battle. This is from Blaze TV. The point that I want to make with all this is first the convoy gets there, then state of emergency, then no fuel or food, then no honking. Also, the government, there's reports of the government having bought up hotel rooms. So say that these people out there in the middle of the street with their trucks run out of fuel, their truck runs out, they're freezing, they try to go get a hotel room, they can't, because all the hotels are bought up by the Ottawa government. Places like Airbnb have been called specifically by the Canadian government to not allow any protesters to stay in their residences. On top of that, there was a GoFundMe account for $10 million that was shut down with the help of the Canadian government, and all of the donations to the Canadian Trucker Convoy were returned after a bit of a kerfuffle where they said they were just going to spend it wherever they wanted, to whatever Black Lives Matter charity they wanted to give it to. So suffice it to say, the government has been trying their best to completely shut this down, peacefully or otherwise, while the protesters have continued to be peaceful. Now, well, the funny thing is, governments are starting to capitulate to the protesters. Governments all across the Western world, as a matter of fact, governments in the United States have started capitulating, saying that they're going to end their mask mandates. Alberta, Canada, is ending its vaccine passport system as of midnight, and this plopped out of nowhere. The Alberta Premier Jackson Kenney basically came out apropos of nothing and said, "Hey, yeah, we're ending it at midnight. Don't think too much about it." Alberta's vaccine passport program ends at midnight on Tuesday, Premier Jason Kenney has announced. The passport system, formerly the Restrictions Exemption Program, requiring people prove that they've been vaccinated before they can go to restaurants or attend events, is the first of the province's current public health restrictions to go in a phased approach Kenney laid out in a news conference on Tuesday. Now is the time to begin learning to live with COVID. These restrictions have led to terrible division. We cannot remain in a heightened state of emergency forever. We have to begin to heal. And this is the language that you really need to look out for when you see these restrictions starting to end in other places. The language of, this has changed, the science has changed, the masks have changed, Omicron is different than Delta, so now we need to make changes. This is not what they were going to do. The only reason that any governments right now in the Western world are ending their things is because people are starting to pick up from this. American convoys are starting to be made. There was a convoy I heard about in Ireland, of all places, convoys in the UK, convoys all over the world. And these governments are realizing, oh, we can't do much about that, because you really need to think about what it means to have a trucker protest in your town. For one, a large percentage of truckers all across the country are not going to be delivering food, and therefore your shelves are going to be bare all over the country, causing more stress for your citizens. Secondarily, the simple fact that the trucks are so much more massive than everybody else's cars, they're going to be blocking up all of the roads, so that even, this is the silliest part, when you cut their fuel off, how do you expect them to leave? If you all expect them to all jump on buses and just leave, all those trucks are still going to be there. And from the little bit of research that I've done, to get one of the tow trucks that are capable of moving one of these big rigs, it takes about, once the truck gets there to tow it, it takes about 60 to 90 minutes. So even if you look at the mainstream media version of, oh, there's only a few hundred trucks left there, that's weeks of removing and logistics. And that's something that I don't personally think the government is capable of, exercise. They can't even get... They're not even competent enough to know when to remove restrictions or to win. So they're not going to be able to authorize a bunch of tow trucks in a really, choreographed sequence of events to go and take these trucks out. They need these truckers to leave on their own will, and there's only one way to do that. This is where I get to what I think is going to happen next. Unfortunately... also, Adriana LaGrange, she decided to end the masking in schools. So there'll be no more, that's the Minister of Education for Alberta, so both they're ending the restaurant mandates for vaccinations and the mask mandates for schools. Again, this is happening all over the place. Now, if you take a look at what the optics of this protest are, you'll notice there's a lot of children. This is good for... if this is televised, if people see this, it's good, because it makes the protesters look good, it makes them realize they're not violent, they're bringing their fucking kids here, they're setting up here. Let's take a look at this. They're setting up... There's more than just this, too. There's, players, kids can set up a Freedom Convoy, they're making their protest look significantly better by making people realize that it's peaceful enough to have children. This is a good thing. However, the government has realized that this may be the cudgel that they are capable to use to break down the wall of this protest. Because if you look at Glenn McGregor, who is Glenn McGregor? Okay, CTV, the Canadian Television National News Journalist in the Parliamentary Press Gallery. Glenn McGregor at bellmedia.ca. He's a powerful journalist in Canada. Just to see a little bit of what he's been tweeting about. This is from February 8th, yesterday, 2:01 p.m. from Glenn McGregor. Ottawa Police Deputy Chief Steve Bell says 25% of trucks camped out at Ottawa Protest have children living in them. Bell also describes an incident yesterday in which OPS members were swarmed by protesters while trying to confiscate fuel canisters. Investigation into the incident is pending. Bell says police are greatly concerned about children living in trucks, the risk of carbon monoxide fumes, cold, sanitation, and noise levels, not yet doing any enforcement re-kids, will rely on guidance from Children's Aid Service. People bringing in water and gas cans is a layer of logistical complexity and a level of sophistication of this group's ability to subvert police as they try to intercept fuel deliveries. That one is just hilarious. The one preceding it is terrifying. But this one's hilarious. Bringing water and gas cans to the government of Canada, represents a layer of logistical complexity and a level of sophistication. All it takes to do that is send out like a group tweet that says, "Hey everybody, tell your buddies to bring..." It's not a level of... This goes to show how unorganized the police are, because they consider that a high level of sophistication and subverting police. But I'd like to focus more on this tweet. Bell says police are greatly concerned about children living in trucks, the risk of carbon monoxide fumes, cold, sanitation, and noise levels. Not yet doing any enforcement re-kids will rely on guidance from Children's Aid Service. There's more tweets like this. This one is from today, escalating it a little bit. Meanwhile, an Ottawa police statement on concerns about children at the protest and role of the Children's Aid Society in Ottawa. Now I'm going to read this in full because it's important, and this is really what I need a trucker to understand, and I'm sure that they do, but for the ones that don't, this is what is about to happen to you. The Ottawa Police Service, in collaboration with the Children's Aid Society of Ottawa, will work to ensure the safety and well-being of children and youth at the current demonstration in the downtown core. Ottawa police officers are aware of concerns about child and youth attendance at the demonstration. Police have a role to play in observing any potential dangers and will report them immediately to CASO, which is the Children's Aid Society. In matters that involve a child or youth who is in the protest area, CASO will work closely with the OPS to respond to that concern. Child and youth well-being and safety is top of mind for CASO. CASO continues to play its role in ensuring the safety and well-being of children and youth in the community. The society has a duty to investigate whenever there are allegations of abuse or neglect that suggest a child or youth may be in need of protection. What do you think protection means in this context? What do you think investigate allegations of abuse or neglect means in this context? That doesn't mean they're going to see a kid who's crying. Well, actually it might. It might mean that they see a kid that's crying for sweets. The kid is crying because he can't get cookies from his dad. The police have to go and investigate that. The kid looks, emotionally troubled. Time to protect that kid. There have been ongoing reports to CASO regarding child welfare concerns amid the Ottawa protest. CASO considers all information received from the public to determine the best response. What's that saying is, if we get enough calls about these kids, we'll probably do something about it. If there are concerns about safety or mistreatment of a child or youth in Ottawa, please call CASO at this number or email at this email address. So, I want people to realize that they're shifting their focus. First, they take the money. They take the GoFundMe account. Okay, they reset it up on Give, Send, Go. They got their investment through another way. They were able to subvert the police action by bringing jerry cans full of water. Whatever. They've done thing after thing after thing, and it's all failed, and these protesters are still there. And the point being that the protesters still have the power, because they are locking, regardless of whether or not the parliament is actually going into that parliamentary building, they are showing the resolve of having the ability to completely cripple the Canadian government. And that's embarrassing, especially to people like Justin Trudeau. This is going to get real bad, and it's going to get real bad real quick. Because when that state of emergency came up, when that fuel, collecting the fuel from people saying you can't bring fuel to them came up, both of those, the GoFundMe thing, all of those things happened within hours of people first noticing that they were starting to happen. Like, the person announces it, the arrests happen. Boom, boom, boom. As soon as one of these officials decides that this protest is overall because of, I don't know, COVID worries, or because of, like this gentleman said, risk of carbon monoxide fumes, cold, sanitation, and noise levels, for whatever reason, they clearly have the pretense to say that these people are abusing these kids. As soon as that one stupid official makes that decision, it's going to go down the chain, and these kids are going to start getting confiscated. What happens then is the question. And I'm very... I am fairly concerned that this could turn into a Tiananmen Square type thing. And I know that sounds crazy, but there's, I mean, for the people who don't know, there's significant evidence that Justin Trudeau is Fidel Castro's illegitimate kid, so maybe it's in the blood there, but regardless, the city has to do something to reinstate its authority. And they believe, their personal belief is that if they don't reinstate their authority, then any time that a group would like a law change, they just go and sit in the Capitol. Now, that obviously is stupid because you're not going to be able to get enough people to do that. You're not going to get 10,000 truckers to go to the Capitol over something like seatbelt laws. But regardless, these government people are dumb, and this is how they think. The point is, when you see people like Glenn McGregor, and you see people talking about taking the children, and you see other posts like Rupa Subramanya, let's see here, columnist for the National Post, used to be the Wall Street Journal and the Foreign Policy magazine, 128,000 followers. I'm sure Ottawa Police is aware of the fact that there are some very young kids who are in the trucks with the parents. I've seen a child as young as 3 inside. I hope they in the city have thought through this. This is... Almost 25% of the F418 trucks have children living in them. Children who should be at risk during a police operation, said OPS Deputy Chief Steve Bell. It's all going back. The Ottawa Children Aid Society will take the children and place them in foster care. At least we won't put them in cages like the U.S. would. The point is not that these people are sensible or that these people are rational. The point is that these people are stupid and they will try to take these children and they don't realize what that will accomplish. So, for the sake of the Canadian protesters, I hope they're taking that seriously. And I would just like to say personally, I would wish I could be there. I live way down in Florida, and I can't fly into Canada for obvious reasons. But I'm there in spirit, and I pray that all of you in the Canadian Convoy are going to be safe. If any officials come up with, just hit that little lock on your door. Don't let them near your children. Anyways, it's been fun. I hope you guys have a wonderful day. Please like, share, and subscribe below. Get this sent out so maybe a trucker will see it. I don't know. Either way, you guys have a wonderful day. Bye-bye.